and welcome. My name is Melissa Leggett, the Lieutenant of the Bolton Fire Department, and it is my honor today to be the Master of Ceremonies for this event. I've had the amazing opportunity to take over for our former Master of Ceremony, Jim Aldrich, and I'd like to give him a special shout out for helping me along the way. For those of you that could you please stand as our guest speakers, Representative Tim Acker, members of the Fire Department, and ASF first responders are led in by the flag bearers from Troop 1073 and Troop 73. Ladies, gentlemen, students, and guests, on behalf of Chief Bruce Dixon and the members of the Bolton Fire Department, the Trauma Home, and the Bolton School System, I'd like to welcome you to our 22nd anniversary of our annual 9/11 Commemorative Ceremony. This event is possible because of the support of the Trauma Home and the Bolton School System. Participants in this event include the Boy Scouts led by Anthony Girisoli, the Ambulance Service of Manchester, EMT Nathan, and paramedic Sean Norton, fire students from Bolton High School led by Dan Aaron, and band members led by Tyler Rayorgi. The fire department has a great appreciation for the efforts of Tyler, Dan, and their students for every year being in this and being able to put together the music portion of the program with only a couple weeks of school. The Bolton Fire Department provides 24/7, 365 days a year service to the town. We also rely on help from our friends over at ASM and our resident state troopers from Troop K. On behalf of a grateful community today, I want to take the time to thank police, fire, EMS, and all other public safety workers for their dedicated and outstanding community service. We pledge to always support your mission. We are fortunate enough to have prominent leaders here to help us commemorate 9/11 and the meaning that this day has come to represent. For the past 22 years in Bolton, we have kept the faith and honored those innocent people and emergency responders killed for those who sought to destroy our nation. 2,753 lost their lives that day in New York. 343 of those were firefighters and paramedics. 23 were members of the NYPD. By recognizing the value of their lives, we endeavor to ensure that they have not died in vain. I would like everyone that please stand to rise again so that our Scouts Diego and Cannon can come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag.
Scouts salute.
Thank you, Diego and Cannon. You may all take a seat. I would like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Pastor Brandon. He joined the Historic Bolton Congregational Church as of January 1st, 2023, as their next settled senior pastor and teacher. Pastor, if you could please come forward and offer us some words of faith regarding the events of 9/11.
Thank you. Well, good evening, and for those of you that do not know, even though there was an introduction, I am the Reverend Brandon Yadger Tyson, the senior pastor and teacher of Bolton Congregational Church, that little white church in the center of town. This evening, we gather to remember and to mourn the tragedy that befell our nation 22 years ago. A terrorist attack that took the lives of a total of 2,977 individuals across all of it. 2,977 mothers, fathers, friends, sons, daughters, lives that may have come to grow our nation but were cut too short to fulfill whatever would have come. On that morning, we as Americans we promised to never forget. And 22 years later, that promise still rings true. As we gather together to not only remember, but reopen the wounds that that day caused, and to remember that we would never let this happen again. On this evening, we keep the memory of all those people, all those precious lives that were lost. And we do so so that we as a country can come together once again, just as we did when the attacks happened. While one may never want to admit that there is a lining to the tragedy, one would be remiss if they did not at least acknowledge that in the tragedies, a light shined through. The light of all those who jumped into action, the various fire departments, the volunteers, the police, and so many others. And then, the community. The community rallied around the survivors and the family of those who lost their lives in such a way that America never saw prior. We truly became a nation unified in our shared grief, and this is one of the many things that we remember here this evening. As a pastor, it's difficult to witness tragedies like this. It is difficult as many turn to their faith leaders for support in their grief and for questions. Nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares us for how to respond. How to take that type of grief of the country upon our shoulders and help so many through the heartbreak and the sadness that's felt. Many want to ask why. Why would God allow this? Why were these lives lost? And the reality is, we don't have those answers. But we must keep our faith to realize that this is not the work of God. This was the work of individuals, the work of terrorists. And also to remember that in that aftermath, God was with us, walking with us, and helping to carry some of that grief for us. God wept along with us. What would have been of the souls lost may never be realized, but we can see who they were, what they meant, and we can use those memories to honor them. 9/11 shook this country to its core, but yet we never faltered. We never gave up. We continued, we persevered, and we rebuilt. We built memorials, we prepared the honorariums, we kept the memory of each of those souls lost fresh in our minds to continue to give them life even when their physical bodies were no longer here. Even today, 22 years later, grief still rings in the ears of those who lost someone on that awful day. And in that time, we are called as the American people to once again, year after year, pick up the yoke of being unified around those individuals, to continue to offer our love, our support, and our care to each of them. We may never fully get past all that took place that day, and honestly, it's my belief that we shouldn't. For if we get past, we will forget. And if we forget, then those whose lives were lost will also be forgotten. All we can do is continue and to do whatever it is that we can to ensure that such tragedies never happen to us here again. So many in the aftermath, they stepped up, and so many still do. Record numbers joined with our armed forces. Many took up government positions to enact laws of protection. Community members and leaders, they created space for those who needed it, and they continue to do so. On this day, as we gather to remember those whose lives we lost, we must also remember all those who sacrificed in the aftermath. All the servicemen and women that gave their lives to ensure that these types of attacks never take place on American soil again. All of the responders, the volunteers who suffered complications and lost due to dust and debris, and everyone else in between. Tonight we have the opportunity to come together as a community to, yes, mourn the lives lost and relive our grief. But most importantly, to remember. Remember the promise we made. Remember how we came together unified to rally around the survivors and the families, and to continue to keep the twinge of pain fresh in our hearts so that we ensure that again we will never allow this to come to fruition again. Tonight, we as the community of Bolton gather as a necessity, a thing that has to be done, something that is needed and something that needs to continue. So let us not forget, let us never get past, and let us continue to remember and memorialize, honor, and keep alive the memories of all those souls that were lost. Let us unite this night and in the coming days as we reopen grief, and let us lean on each other. Let us come together as we once did. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Wayne. I was going to say, I lost the other half. We're sharing. I would like to introduce our next guest speaker, Robert Mora.
Good evening, everyone. Pardon not having a hat, but it's a bit warm in here. And when you reach a certain age, it starts to bother you. But with that, before I begin, I would just like to thank the Bolton Fire Department, again, for the efforts that you have put in to make this all possible. Thank you so much. Our community truly appreciates it. Let's give them a great hand. Well, thank you all for joining in our 9/11 remembrance ceremonies. As Pastor stated, it's been over 2 decades since the 9/11 terrorist attacks. For those of us who watched that event occur on our TVs that day, it is buried in our minds forever. That will never go away. This morning, as I drove to work, I was listening to the radio station, and we're playing back different comments of the event as it occurring, of the towers being hit and the towers going down. And it just hit the same feelings of that day still today. It still is today. That unspeakable loss of life and the incredible heroism all wrapped up in that one day. Now there are many here today who were not even born 22 years ago when this occurred. And we hold these ceremonies every year for everyone, those who did, who were part of this, and those who have come after that. And to pay our respects to the nearly 3,000 souls that were killed in the attacks, and also their families who also suffered greatly from that. We also use this occasion to honor the heroes of 9/11, the firefighters, the EMTs, police officers, and the other first responders. These were the heroes who ran to the towers as hundreds of people ran for their lives from the towers. The firefighters proceeded up the burning towers, helping evacuate. Scores trapped inside. Hundreds of lives were saved. Then the unthinkable happened. The towers collapsed, taking the lives of those still trapped and the lives of several hundred firefighters and EMTs. We also honor the citizen heroes who were on board that hijacked airplane, who knowing that if this plane were not stopped, it was going to attack the Capitol. So what did they do? They overwhelmed the terrorists, knowing that no one else could fly the plane, and it dove into the fields in Pennsylvania, sacrificing their lives, saving hundreds of lives. The heroism shown that day is a lesson to all about the character, the commitment of our firefighters, EMTs, and all other first responders who in time of need, no matter the danger, will be there for you and for all of us. And there's one other lesson from that day, and it's equally significant. It's simply this. Everyday Americans, such as you all, when called upon to do extraordinary and when called upon, can do extraordinary and heroic feats. Those 9/11 heroes prove that. So let us all do our best to honor those past heroes and those who protect us today by being there to help someone in their time of need, by supporting our first responders, such as the men and women in our fire department. And also, if you'd like, help join the fire department and become an EMT. And at a time in our nation when it sometimes feels like we are more divided than united, these 9/11 ceremonies are needed more than ever. And they are a reminder that we are a nation and a people who will come to the aid of those in need. Our fellow citizens, no matter who, no matter when, no matter the danger. So we this day, so we see this every day in the actions of the men and women of the Bolton Fire Department, who volunteer their service for our community 24/7. And ask, just give us the right equipment, we'll do the job. Well, let's look forward. That tomorrow, where are tomorrow's heroes coming from? Well, folks, they are here today. The heroes of 9/11 exist here amongst us, only waiting for the occasion, for the event that will bring that heroism out. I'm confident of that, and this is the type of community we are. Thank you very much.
To help us remember our shared love for this land, the students from the Bolton High School Choir, please lead us all in singing the first verse of America the Beautiful. For those that can, would you please stand?
Well, thank you for the honor of being here tonight and the honor of serving this great community. I also want to do a shout out to Representative Weir, my colleague that we've worked diligently on in the House over the last 2 years, so it's been a true honor. During our lives, there are many dates that we remember. Celebration dates like birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, victories, and many others. Then there are the dates that are part of our lives we don't look forward to. We know these events by name, not typically by the date. From birthdays to our final days, from holidays to special events, it's rare we say the date. But in our country, we have memorable dates. July 4th. We say July 4th typically rather than Independence Day. The 4th of July celebrates the passage of the Declaration of Independence by the Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776. The Declaration announced the political separation of the 13th American colonies from Great Britain. We became a free country. December 7th, Who remembers the significance of this date? Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. A date which will live in infamy was how then President Franklin D. Roosevelt described Japan's sudden and undeclared attack on the U.S. naval station at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on December 7, 1941. Their assault killed 2,403 Americans and destroyed a number of battleships and other vessels, as well as important facilities on Pearl Harbor. It shocked the American public and directly led them to declare war on Japan the following day. The attack showed that the U.S. was vulnerable. How many people will know the significance of December 7th? September 11th, Patriot Day. 9/11. That is all someone needs to mutter. It will probably bring you back to where you were when you heard or saw the reports of what took place that infamous morning. Please take a moment and reflect on this date. The world has never been the same since September 11, 2001. Evil showed its full might on that clear blue morning, striving to cripple this nation through terror, mayhem, and immense sorrow after more than 3,000 innocent lives were murdered before our eyes. Yet on that infamous, tragic day, the brave and good also reacted, repelling the darkness and inferno from inflicting total defeat. Within my lifetime, these United States have never felt more united before or since. As we cheered on President George W. Bush's pledge, I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear from all of us. This resilient spirit was the day's ultimate legacy. It extended beyond American shores of Afghanistan with the launching of Operation Enduring Freedom after the Taliban refused to extradite Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. For me, it is all too often, I look at a watch or a clock and I see 9/11. As I write this, I looked up and I saw 9/11 as I was writing this. As if I'm supposed to react in some way. It doesn't haunt me. It continues to remind me. Do you know that nearly 50 million Americans were born after 9/11? Here are 3 ways our lives have changed since 9/11. The war on terror, which in all intents and purposes lasted 2 decades, and over 2,400 U.S. soldiers killed and over 20,000 were wounded. Air travel was transformed. Before 9/11, people didn't even have to have a ticket to wander around the airport or wait at the gate. No one checked passenger IDs before boarding the plane. And the only item people ever had to remove passing through security was loose change in their pockets. And checked baggage was rarely scanned. Surveillance increased. The Patriot Act was passed just 6 weeks after 9/11 as lawmakers scrambled to fix the intelligent failures that allowed known terrorists to enter the United States and execute the deadliest plot in American history. The controversial act authorized sweeping changes in how domestic intelligence agencies like the FBI conducted surveillance. We became a less free country. I want to thank you for remembering and attending tonight. This is a fantastic ceremony. I thank you for coming. Let's keep the remembrance going. I want all of us, as has already happened, to thank the first responders today and every day. On 9/11, that what was mentioned, the New York Fire Department lost 343 heroes. Let us never forget. God bless you and all those that have served. Thank you.
I'd like to invite another guest speaker, Louise Padula.
I thought a lot about what to say today or even to speak today, but a friend of mine reminded me That stories like mine that are personal, my personal experience, keep this memory alive. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so a little close. Okay. So my story begins on September 8th, 2001. And for those of you that know me, and most of you don't, I'm an overplanner. I plan meals during the week, I plan every hour of the day, I plan. And as an overplanner, you're kind of under this illusion you can control things. You can control your day, you control your week, you control things. And so I planned. It was September 8th, 2001. I planned to move my parents, who had just sold their home in Queens, Bayside, Queens. That street actually is named after my brother now on 42nd Avenue, if you ever happen to be there. That house was sold at 40 years, and they bought their home on 10 Notch Road, which is like down the block. And while they were away, they bought the house, and they went on a cruise, and my husband and I, as a surprise, took all their belongings that were in storage and decided to surprise him and move their things into their new home. So on September 10th, I, for some reason, thought it was the 11th because school was starting and I was kind of a little overwhelmed with the girls. And so I called my brother that day because his 40th birthday is September 11th, 2001. And so I called him to wish him happy birthday. And he's like, well, why are you calling me? It's only the 10th. And I'm like, you know what, Mom and Dad just came back from their trip, give them a call, and we had a little conversation. And so my mom called me like the gypsy woman because my brother actually called her that night to have a conversation. He hadn't spoken in over 2 weeks, so that was a bizarre thing. But nothing in my life prepared me for 9/11. I never envisioned a scene. That particular day, the girls, we took them off to school, my youngest to dance class with Miss Maurice. And my husband had worked the night before, and I had no idea what was going on. I was busy with the kids, and he calls me. He was coming up his night shift, and he said, put the TV on. Now, mind you, my parents had just got into their home. No cable, no TV, no mailbox, no phone. They're in this new home a day, 2 days. And he goes straight from work to their home. I bring out to dance, and I go to my parents' house. We have this little black and white 5-inch TV on the counter, and we're watching as it's transpiring. And that day, a lot transpired during the day, but we had decided as a family that that evening, when the girls got off the bus, we were going to go into New York. And so, nothing prepared me for walking into my brother's home. My brother has 4 girls, Frankie, Tony, Nikki, Danny, yes, he did one boy. 4 girls, ages 2, 4, 6, and 8 years old. And we walked into their home, and at the kitchen table, the girls had a birthday cake. It's Dad's birthday, where's Dad? Can you call him? Why isn't he here? And that was the first thing that I really wasn't quite prepared for. It was incomprehensible to a child, and how do you explain to a child that he's just not here? So to find the right words to say to these little girls. And how does one prepare themselves for a trip to Manhattan? We decided among the family that the 2 people that probably would be the best to go down there to look for my brother. And then my mother had said to me, you always bring me good news, please go down and find him. Just a little bit of pressure. And so to go down to Manhattan, and we drove through. Every bridge was closed, military people at every bridge, every roadblock, and we got through to Manhattan and get to my brother's firehouse, and we muscled our way down to the command center. And it was like a war zone, literally. I mean, it was dust everywhere, military people everywhere, chaos. And navigated our way, talked my way into command center person to get us into Stuyvesant High School. There were batteries on, they wouldn't let anyone in. And he walks us into Stuyvesant High School, and he says, I hope you find what you're looking for, and just basically left us there. We walk into Stuyvesant High School, and there's generators going, and there's search rescue dogs everywhere. These firemen that are coming in, they're covered in soot, and none of them had eaten. This is the next morning, and Al went up to the locker room in the kitchen, and he's breaking the locker, and we're dumping food into vats. It was like chaos. But again, this is the other thing that people didn't realize. Out of nowhere, food was being brought in. People were dropping off huge truckloads of sandwiches and food, and restaurants were just massive amount of food was coming. So Al and I were down at Ground Zero for about 2 days. And we helped in any way we could, and we were irrigating eyes, firemen were just covered with dust, organizing supplies, and at one point they had asked us to, what a lot of people don't realize is that we're talking a 15-plus acre, and this is a huge area. And so the surrounding towers were also affected by this. They had no electricity, they had no running water, they had no air conditioning. It was a hot September day. And so they had asked a doctor, a nurse, and a military National Guardsman to go in this 39-story building, take 3 or 4 floors at a time, and go door to door and bring people down, physically carry them down because the elevators weren't working. And that was the first time we had been separated, and it was a little scary, to be really honest. We went floor to floor, and a lot of people, elderly, they didn't want to leave their pets, and they didn't want to, and they were hot apartments, and the windows open, and no air conditioning, it was a mess. We did what we could, we did that for a while, brought people down, and at that point we had heard there was a rumor that another building had fallen, and that's when we decided to go back to Stuyvesant High School. So we went back to Stuyvesant High School, and people were coming back to Ground Zero, Stuyvesant High School Command Center, and they were saying that they had been down to the pit. And what the pit is that picture that you see, that famous picture of the steel grate, the steel grades, and that evening, it was illuminated. And you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but Space Odyssey. It was like this bright light, and a very, very dark, clear night. And it was so lit, it was like daytime at that spot, and all you see the firemen working. And this was not very far from the high school, so I really wanted to go down there. I felt I still had to look, and every fireman I saw, I thought was my brother. They're all covered, so everybody looked the same. Everybody looked like my brother. And so you might play tricks on you. So anyway, so we leave the firehouse. We leave Stuyvesant High School, and we walk not very far, here to the door, perhaps, and I see my brother's fire truck. I see ladder 5 fire truck, and both of us walk right up to it, and we didn't say a word, but we wrote in dust, "Love you, Vinny," on the door of the truck. And it was, and still is very emotional when I think about it, because to me that was the last place he was. The truck was completely intact, it was just covered in dust. I heard later on from a firefighter, and another, I could better look at the stories, but later on a firefighter told me when we were going down to the piers, which is another story, that when they brought the truck into the firehouse and they towed it in, it was still on the truck. "We love you, Vinny." And the guys in the firehouse it broke down tears when they saw that. They just couldn't believe it. So we wrote, "We love you, Vinny," from Ground Zero into the firehouse. And how do you prepare yourself for the shock and disbelief? And you take it as physically standing at Ground Zero, and the best way I can describe it is it's hot, it's smoldering, and you see things, little things. You see little bits of computer pieces and little scraps of paper look like confetti. And you're looking at all these little things around you, and finally it hits you. It's like, there's no way a person can survive this. Absolutely no way my brother's going to survive this. It's just these inanimate objects couldn't survive it. And so then the next decision was, we got to tell I had to go home. I had to tell my family. They're still believing he's coming home. They still believe he's going to be found. My mother would say, when I got home, she'd say to me, "Do you think, how's he breathing? He's going to be okay?" And all the dust. They were really under this illusion he was going to be found. But before we leave Manhattan that day, the next day, there's all these bomb threats, and it was chaos in the city. That we heard on the radio they wanted people to do a missing person report. I'm sure no one in this room has ever done such a thing, thank God. So we go to the Army, because I knew my mother and my sister could never ever have done this. And we filled out a 15-page report regarding my brother. Tattoos, dentures, teeth, scars, surgeries. I mean, my mother would have been on the floor, where this huge army, people are literally having emotional breakdowns, filling out personal questions regarding their family member that can't be found. But we got a missing person number, so apparently that's what they wanted. They wanted to make sure they had everyone logged. To this day, we have not found any remains of my brother. And if you ever go down to the Trade Center, to the museum. You go down the stairs, there's a whole wall. Behind that wall, they are still looking through remains to this day. It's still ongoing. And then how do you tell your family when you go back to Long Island after doing all this, who refuse to give up hope that there's no way your brother survived this? And so the next series of events were they had called for families to go down for meetings, and the meetings were actually, what they wanted was DNA testing. So no script for any of this. So we had to, they also gave us an opportunity as a family to go down to the site. My sister kind of jumped on that one. First of all, physically, you go down to 9/11, to go down to the ground zero, to go down to the site. All of us, my mother, my father-in-law, go down to the site. And my mother's still thinking my brother's going to be there. She's still thinking he's going to be found. And we're standing at the site, and she looks at the firefighter who walks us in, and she says, well, where's the stairwell? We knew he was in the stairwell. We knew he was on Tower 1. We knew he was in the stairwell. We had heard from different people who knew my brother. So, but where's the stairwell? And he basically looked at my mother and he said, ma'am, you're standing on it. And I think that was the moment. My mother was like collapsed. It's like, then you knew. And how do you prepare to tell your nieces that dad's never coming home? And then discreetly doing a DNA swab on them, because we had to do DNA swabs for them to find remains. So I'm swabbing my niece's buccal mucosa. And then have you carry out your sister's wedding. September 28, 2001, my sister was getting married, planned a yearly mass to a firefighter who survived 9/11. And then how do you stay strong when your father's being carried away by an ambulance for a cardiac event at the church at your sister's wedding? And how do you plan a memorial service within 2 weeks of your sister's wedding? And when do you plan it? Because you have no remains. So there's no script or etiquette. This is like, we were just figuring it out as we're going along. There's no etiquette for what we experienced as a family. Planning was impossible. So I look back at those moments, and what gives me solace is the belief that life events, whether good, bad, horrific, help our spirit to grow and learn. So you see, we all suffer. Everybody suffers. There's not a human on earth that doesn't suffer. I think the quote is, to live is to suffer, and to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. That's in Nietzsche's comment. Quote. And I think there's truth behind that. So I often ask myself, how do I make this horrific event a positive life lesson for my 3-year-olds? They're watching. They're watching the whole thing. They're watching the family. They're watching us all navigate this. And what do I want them to gain from this experience? And what will be my legacy? So you see, when someone suffers a loss, and I've told this many times to my family, and I've told this to patients I've had, whether the loss be a loved one, a parent, a sibling, a child, it's like being emotionally amputated. That's the best description I can have. See, the stump's always there. The limb never grows back. You always know what it's like having two arms, 2 legs. So you have to make a decision as a family member, I'd say my mother. Do you want to be the person sitting in the wheelchair, looking out the window? Or do you want to be the one-legged skier, or the one-armed car, driving the car? You got to physically figure out you are emotionally amputated. So you always feel the loss, you always know there's a stump, but it's never going to grow back. So a lot has happened over the past 22 years of my life. And over the most recent years, this melancholy event that I would be in this funk, literally days before 9/11, has been replaced by some awesome, happy milestones. 2 of my daughters have gotten married in September, and I have 2 grandchildren born in September. 2022 and 2020, and I have another 3rd grandson who's born in July 2022. And just a few weeks ago, my brother's oldest daughter, Frankie, who was 8, is now a probie on the New York City Fire Department. She just graduated. So, which is really cool. She got my brother's badge, and she was going to have his firehouse and a lot of cool stuff like that. So this is how I envision my legacy, and each of us has a legacy. And I wanted my legacy not to be defined by this moment or event in my life. And I wanted my girls to learn a lesson that you have to handle adversity and move forward. So I'm asking you to take some time today, tomorrow, and think about, what if you suddenly weren't here? What would your legacy be? And I think that's a good question to ask. And I think that's what 9/11 did. It made us really realize what it's going to be like if I weren't here, what would my family look like if I wasn't here. And so that's my story, most of it anyway. Thank you.
slightly different take on 9/11. It's from a different perspective, not a different take. My feelings for 9/11 began about a month before the actual attack. We had a foreign exchange student living with us for a year through Spain, Roxana Sanchez. And we took her every place we could to show her this country, because that's why she was here. And we took her to the World Trade Center. And excuse me, the one thing she wanted to do was lay down at the foot, take pictures right up. So I'm a little emotional, I'm sorry. But that's my first thought when I think of 9/11. The second thing comes the day before that. My daughter was going to Spain, she was going to be an overseas student. And we were at Dulles Airport in the area where most of the flights go out to the Middle East. And my daughter and my wife and I are sitting there, and we're watching all these people with carts that looked like they had every piece of belonging they had. And I said to my wife, it looks like they're all going home. And, you know, I wish I'd called the FBI that day, but, you know, you see something, say something. But the next morning, I said to my wife, they were going home. They knew. So it wasn't just the people that we identified. There was a whole network of people working in this country to pull that out. The next morning, I was in bed and drove home from Dulles, and I got a call from my mom. The first thing she said was, a plane hit the World Trade Center. And she was thinking it was just a Cessna or something like that. Was what I was thinking. And I got downstairs, I turned on the TV just in time to see the second plane hit. And, you know, as firefighters, we take building construction. It's one of the things we have to know if we're going to be a firefighter. And I watched the plane take out the center core of that building. And knowing building construction, the center core of the World Trade Center, it's a different kind of construction, or was a different kind of construction. They called it lightweight, because everything's set on the center core and the outside walls held nothing up. And in the center core are the elevators, the fire escapes, and all the fire protection systems. So when those planes took out the center core, everything was gone. The fire protection systems, anything the firefighters could have used. And I said to my wife, those buildings are coming down. And she said, what? And I said, they can't stand. They can't stand that kind of damage. And it was just a couple of minutes later that everything began to happen. Now, the firefighters that responded that day had the same training I did. They knew building construction probably better than I did, because they dealt with high-rises every day. And they knew that the people above the strikes were doomed. There was no way that they were going to get off those floors without elevators or stairways or fire protection to protect them. And the firefighters that went in the doors knew the same things. They knew they were walking into a death trap. They knew that, we know it every day as firefighters, that there's a chance we won't come home. But that's just a chance. They walked in and they knew almost for certain that there was a good chance they weren't coming out of this, but they went in anyway. Police officers do the same thing. Every time we have to fire, we see a police officer and they're trying to get people out before we arrive. They, unfortunately, didn't have the same training, and their decision was not based on the same facts. But those firefighters knew the peril they were walking into. It wasn't an everyday fire. They knew there was a very good chance they'd never come out, but they went in anyway. You know, what we lost on that day, people said 3,000 people. We talked about passengers on Flight 93, and the 343 firefighters and 71 police officers. But 3,000 children lost their parent. 1,600 children, 1,600 people lost their spouse. And since 9/11, we've lost over 10,000 people to related illnesses. Excuse me. As a firefighter in East Hartford, the chief gave us carte blanche to go to funerals. He said, take the car and go. The first funeral that I attended was for the most junior man on the department who had just started on the job a couple of days before, out of the academy, and the most senior man on the department who could have retired 15 years earlier but wanted to stay on the job. That funeral was held at the cathedral in Manhattan. And I stood there with easily 10,000 people. They were 50 deep, and they stretched for a line in this direction. And everyone was as emotional about me. It was a horrible sight because of what it was, but there were firefighters from almost every state of the country, almost every large city, almost dozens of small departments, volunteer departments, career departments, standing side by side, all of them in tears. There were firefighters from Australia, from New Zealand, from Japan, from Canada, from Europe, all over the country and the world, people came. And cities like LA sent 5 people to stay there and 10 funerals, and for weeks and weeks and weeks. I had the opportunity to go down numerous times, and it was a sobering event every time I went there. As I sit there, and I sat there after it, and my wife said, "You shouldn't talk about this," but I don't want to listen to her and get in trouble. But why did we get attacked? That's the question that comes to mind. Why did they do that to us? It's because they're afraid of us. They're afraid of us, the dictators, the autocrats, and tyrants, and the people with religious extreme, the ones who have taken their religions and convoluted them into something you can't even tell from what was originally written. These people are afraid of us because they want to keep their people down. And the people in these countries and these religions see us, see the freedoms we have, and the things that we enjoy. It's only a matter of time before the people in these countries and these places where people are held back, before they say too much and overthrow their governments or go the way we did, breaking away from England and become free ourselves. So we're always going to be a threat to them. We were never a military threat to them before. And this is what I think they're upset about, and they're afraid of. I think to this day, they're afraid of us. They have to, with what's going on in Russia, what's going on in North Korea, what goes on in the Middle East. We enjoy freedoms. We enjoy the freedom to choose our leaders, to worship as we choose, to educate every kid, not just the men, every kid. We enact laws, we govern ourselves. And we take all of this for granted. But we can't. It's not a given. We have to protect this every day. We're always at a risk of of losing these freedoms. From threats from the outside, threats from inside, blurring of the lines between church and state, internal extremist groups, external extremist groups that are in this country and we don't even know about. And as Bob mentioned, the political climate today. We've never been more apart, and we can't be more apart. Our strength comes from the way we're made up. We're the most diverse country on this earth, and we have people from every country on the earth living with us here peacefully and happily. Our strength is in numbers, our strength is in diversity, our strength is in unity. And the one ideal it stands for is that everybody is created equal. That's our strength. That's why they don't like us. That's why they're afraid of us, because we believe these things. And the last thing I'm going to say is the first thing I think of when I think of 9/11. On the day after, there was a newscast, and I turned on the TV and I caught his broadcast. And they were talking about why they did it and what it was, and he said they did it because they want to change us. And he said they did. And they flashed to a street that looked like Brooklyn, but it could have been any downtown street in any small city in this country. And every house had a flag on it. That sticks with me to this day. And since then, there's been a flag on the front of my house. And there always will. Thank you. Matt Ferry, will come forward, Deputy Chief. Matt's going to read the bell ceremony. The hat you see on top of it is a remembrance to Mr. Price, former chief, former member of our fire department for many, many, many years. It sits here, it's always worked.
The men and women of today's fire service are confronted with more dangerous work environment than ever before. We are forced to continually change our strategies and tactics to accomplish our tasks. Our methods may change, but our goals remain the same as they have in the past: to save lives, to protect property, sometimes at terrible cost. This is what we do. This is our chosen profession. This is the tradition of the firefighter. The fire service of today is ever-changing, but is steeped in traditions of over 200 years. One such tradition is the ringing of the bell. In the past, as firefighters began their tour of duty, it was the bell that signaled the beginning of their day's shift. Throughout the day and night, each alarm was sounded by a bell, which summoned these brave souls to fight fires and to place their lives in jeopardy for the good of their fellow citizens. And when the fire was out and the alarm had come to an end, it was the bell that signaled to all that the completion of the call. When a firefighter had died on line of duty, paying the supreme sacrifice, it was the tolling of the bell that solemnly announced the comrade's passing. We utilize these traditions as symbols which reflect honor and respect of those who have given so much and who have served so well. To symbolize the devotion that these brave souls had for their duty, a special signal of 3 bells 3 times each represents the end of our comrades' duties, and that they will be returning to quarters. And so, to those who have selflessly given their lives for the good of their fellow man, their tasks completed, their duties well done. To our comrades, their last alarm, they are going home. Please stand with me, if you are able, to honor those who have selfishly given their lives for the good of their fellow man, their tasks completed, their duties well done. To their comrades, their last alarm, they are going home. Thank you very much. You may be seated.
Will the students from the choir please come up to lead us in the national anthem? Again, I would like to thank everyone for taking their time out of their busy day to be here to attend this event. I'd like to thank all of our speakers and guests for putting up with me and my countless emails and for being here today. I'd like to thank the band and the chorus and the scouts for also taking time out of their busy day to be here, and all of my brothers and sisters in the fire department for helping us out today. This concludes our program, and again, thank you all for being here.